Miranda. I'm the director of the gallery. I'm very excited to be here with you guys and also with our artists and our special guest. This has been a really exciting project for me. I've been a gallerist and curator for over 15 years, doing lots of different kinds of programming, and was for 4 years the director of a college gallery. When I came back to this space just in May, I said, you know, I've been doing this gallery stuff, I really would like to try something a little bit different. And I was interested in more collaborative, more performative, more community-oriented projects, and I decided, well, let's do that. So I put out a call for a residency, and the criteria for the residency would have to be 2 or more artists. They would take over the gallery for 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the project, and create a project that had to be collaborative and it had to be unique. In other words, it couldn't pre-exist. It had to be created in the confines of the gallery and within that time frame, and then it would culminate in an exhibition or something like that. So that's sort of the background of the residency, and I think I won't talk too much more about that, but you can check out the website for more information about what we do here. And we're doing some exciting things, so I hope you'll get on our mailing list if you're not already. So I was thrilled to get a proposal from 3 artists, Beth Dary, Sarah Lutz, and Eileen Sunshine. Sarah Lutz and Beth Dary are here with us tonight, and Eileen Sunshine, we just have to send a shout out to her because she ended up not being able to continue with the residency because of some family obligations. But so we keep her in our hearts, and have been actually during the whole process of this residency. And so, hi Eileen. And so I'm going to try not to talk too much. I'm going to introduce the artists and our special guests, and I think you guys can talk more about how Pam came to be here with us tonight. But the couple, what we would like to do is we're going to each talk for a few minutes and then open it up to conversation. What I'm most interested in this space and in this project is for people to get engaged in a conversation. And this collaboration has been a conversation that started between them and between me and between the space and between the community and now with you. And so we really hope that you'll join us in the conversation. And so some of the questions that came up for me, there's lots of things, and I know there's probably some ones that will come up obviously, but there are a couple of things that came up for me in terms of the residency while I'm working with Beth and Sarah was how their relationship to this community is new and different for them, Portchester and the surrounding communities. Portchester is such an interesting town if you haven't been here before, and how that's affected them in the future, in their future ideas about this area and their relationship to it, and how do we engage in community and create communities and continue communities over time when we move to different places. I think that's important to me. And then the fact that this residency is a lot about water, and they're going to talk about that, so I won't. But I'll just say that I'm very interested in interdisciplinary artists who work with interdisciplinary subjects, all different kinds of science. And so I'm interested in that, the ways that art and science intersect and connect, and what that means. And it may not seem apparent by first glance at this residency, at this installation that that's there, but it's a big part of it. And then finally, for me, what's important, because they ended up having a lot of issues about the environment and water come up during this residency. Yes, right? Yes, literally. And you know, that became an important component. And I think it's an important part of the conversation. And for me, one of the questions is how can beauty and art, what role does beauty and art have in that conversation about important issues of our day? And does it play a role? What role do artists have? What role does beauty have in these important issues about water and climate change and other things that just naturally came up in this residency? So I just will introduce Beth and Sarah. Sarah and Beth. Who are amazing artists, and I've been so thrilled to work with them. And Pam Solo, we're so honored to have you here. And you guys can talk about how she came about to be here. But she is the founder and president of the Civil Society Institute. Its core mission is to support the engagement of community-based organizations in state, regional, and public policy issues. And so she comes from a different perspective, and what I'm interested in is how those things connect. So I hope you will welcome the artists and join the conversation.
Lutz, and I'm primarily a painter and also some printmaking. And I got to know Patricia about 12 years ago, and then I had the opportunity to be in a couple of group exhibits here in the gallery. And because of that, I was on her mailing list when she sent out the open call. And I had gotten to know Beth because we're both artists and we're parents in the same school, is how we got to know each other. But we both spend a lot of time on Cape Cod, on the outer tip of Cape Cod, surrounded by water and the environment, and the imagery from that influence is important to both of our work. So I had always thought that Beth and Eileen would be interesting people to work for, so I don't take much credit beyond the idea that I contacted both of them and asked them if they would like to apply to do this residency. And so we put together a proposal and applied, and we're thrilled when Patricia invited us to be the inaugural group to do this work. But basically, I'm an abstract painter by trade, and I have never drawn on a wall since I was 3 years old. So this has been a wonderful experience for Beth and I to get to know each other better and to work together. And it's been, I don't know what will come next for us together and for myself individually, but it's been a terrific experience.
I agree. And thank you. It's really all of us, the conversations have been very rich and meaningful these weeks being here. So I'm Beth Dary, and my background is with sculpture, and recently I've been doing installation works, some public art works, different mediums, always combining, worked with glass and porcelain, and tonight, or for this exhibition, there's a bit of a sound element which is new to me, so this area and the community of Port Chester and the region here brought that to the installation. So working together side by side and really being on the walls and being here and being on a ladder and sculpting these elements, and Sarah and I painting together and Sarah drawing and layering it. And so not only the work became layered in that community aspect to it, but just the conversations that we're having. So it's great to be here and have it open up to everybody here. So.
Hi, my name is Pam Salon. I'm the president of the Civil Society Institute, which is based in the Boston area. And we I have worked over the years on a variety of issues, but I've been focusing mainly on the water energy nexus for the past, I would say, 6 or 8 years. And I'm a bit of a fish out of water, no pun intended. Here in that I've been a political organizer all my life, which has been a while. But this is an incredibly unique opportunity for me to talk about these issues and to do it in such great company. Thank you for having me.
So Beth, can you just tell people, and Sarah, what the process of, about the water, how that relates to it?
Sure. Well, one of the things when we were thinking about the proposal is both being interested in the environment and waterways and how we're all connected by these elements. And we thought to look at the community of Port Chester in this area and bring that into the residency. And we were looking at the Sound, Long Island Sound, and the Byram River, and so that's what runs through Port Chester, and I'll just stand up. But we decided to connect those waterways, and again speaking to the community, and so we're running the Sound up until where the Byram River starts, and it's undulating and running to scale, in essence, the river line. So if when we're done here, you'll come and you can see this drawn line that really runs the element through the entire room and brings it back as it is a full circle. And that's also with the circles in mind, bringing that shape back into it so that it's a continual element throughout the installation. So we also, in that, and this is part of what I don't mean to have my back to you, but yeah. One of the reasons, Pam it's so great to have you here to talk to us about what is happening with the environment. And we laid in, it became structural for us to kind of get into the space, this water line, and then there's 3 other water lines that you can see. Again, they're sort of traces, we've left them, but they were the beginnings of our drawing and getting into the residency and on the wall, some of it off the wall as we started to work. But so it was representing to us the turn of the century line here, waterways here, and this would represent the current water lines here, and then also the future and how much rapid growth there is between this time that we have. So, do you want to say something?
Well, I'll just say this is a good time to say Pam has been a close family friend of ours for a very long time, and because of the work that she's involved with, she in 2005 had, well, maybe I'll let you talk about it.
Okay, in 2005, we were looking at the data from climate scientists about sea rise, and so we asked some cartographers to create some maps that showed what would happen with the different surge of the ocean with different levels of warming and melting of the Antarctic. And so in 2005 we produced this map, and the cartographers were sort of stunned by their own work and were hesitant for us to release it because they thought, well, it was going to create too much of a controversy, and this isn't our business. We're not into creating controversy. We make maps. But if you go over, when we're finished here, you'll see we put, Sarah and Beth put it on their blog, the map from 2005, and then the map that FEMA released in 2012. And it's eerily very similar. We're forecasting it. I wish we were wrong, but that's the context in which we're here today in this environment, in this transformed room.
So just before we started working on the project, I contacted Pam and said, could you find and send me that interactive map again? Because, well, there were 2 things. There was the map predicting what would happen in a sort of catastrophic situation like what we just had and experienced. And then there was another map that was an interactive online map where you could move, and these links are on our blog, where you can change the sea level rise and see, whether or not you will be underwater if something horrible happens. And so I had asked Pam if she could send me those because I thought it might be very interesting to look at the town of Port Chester, since it is a seaport town and was founded as a shipbuilding and fishing community. And so we were interested in looking at that in the past and in the present day. And so when Pam found those things and started sending them to me, that said, wow, it would be so amazing if we could get Pam to participate with us. So that's why Pam is here too. But I think
it's been so informative, and I've learned from what we've all been talking about, and between the sciences and art, which is what Patricia, I think, was during our conversations thinking about, and it really brought it together in another sense for me. For us,
right,
too.
Well, and I think it informs. I'm sorry.
No. So the artists were here for a week working. It's going great. We're all excited. They're doing the stuff about the water, mapping the river line, and going into the community and talking to the historical society and stuff like that. And then we had the hurricane. So that deeply, it's interesting how it brought home all the stuff that they were dealing with. We were out of power here. We were fine. We weren't flooded, although a good part of Port Chester was hit pretty hard. But we had no power for a week. So do you want to say how that affected the residency of your?
Well, I think we all of us have different experiences in this room, and many, we know each other and know some of the stories, and some know mine. But during this evacuation, I was lucky to go and stay in a hotel, and I took the opportunity there to take the ice bucket and I filled it with plaster, and I started building these sculptures, the little ones that are in the drawings here, and getting ready, making molds. But thinking now, look, just even in the last couple of weeks, we had talked about when we finally were able to come back, did we need to have more time? Did we need to have it maybe open a few weeks later. And at that time, I was really putting, as we were, one foot in front of the other. And this residency really gave me purpose and meaning. And I felt, let's keep going. And now I realize, just these few weeks later, how important it was for me to have this and have this work and open tonight. And that it felt very raw and important to me, to us. Yeah.
So I could have lots of questions for them, but I'm interested to know if you guys have questions.
I
Yes.
have a question right away. Beth, you know, you moved here from New Orleans
Right.
from another flooding
Right.
situation. I mean, it must have compounded.
It really has, and that's why.
Did that influence the decision originally to do this work?
It has over the last several years. And as I was saying, there's some very close friends here, and when we do know each other's as artists and works and where we're all moving. And I was living in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, and I came here and met many of my friends that are in the room tonight. So the beauty of that, to make new friends and community. So that did start my looking at maps, and the idea of these clusters and barnacles is what I think of them, is that they are the first on the littoral zone of low-lying areas, and they start to grow where water moves up. And so that's, I've been thinking about that, and their tenacity and their strength, and their beauty and their danger, and they build communities as they grow. You know, there's over 1,000 species of them, and they don't tend to live together. And they edge each other out. So there's all these different meanings that I've found working with this structure and this type of idea. And that was the combination that Sarah and I share in these water forms and these concerns and issues, and working together and creating that language brought this and the work I've done in the past to a completely different area for me that I felt I wanted to do, but you know, it was kind of scary sometimes on that level too. And so how we work together, you know, it's been so great to be here and working.
Can you just say again, where do barnacles grow? They grow where the water is beginning to rise, or where it
Well, they're
rises
in the
to?
littoral area, littoral zone.
Which
so
means what?
below, and then they come to where
so
the,
between the, yeah.
right. And then my thinking with that is the water rises,
Right.
and that's what they start to grow, and so they're the next communities.
And that's why they grow on, you know, the hulls of ships. And that's why in this environment, what we chose to do was, well, in the beginning, we realized right away, which was humorous, since we both have good sense of humor, that my vision, because of what my sensibility is that things would cluster, because we both do that. But I had vision that it would cluster and grow up from the ground. And Beth said, oh, well, that's interesting, because I was envisioning that they were going to cluster and come down from the top. And I said, oh, well, that, uh-oh, you know, oopsie. But then what we realized was when we put in the topography, if you could say that, of the river, we realized we're just going to cluster around the river line, and we're going to figure out, given the architecture of the space, which is an amazing space to work with, in the first couple of days, we just mapped out where we thought the clusters should be and moved them visually around the room. So some of the decisions were very just sort of visual, formal art decisions, and then some of the decisions were much more conceptual and scientific and based that way.
Other questions?
I like these ones on the electric thing. That's
Yes,
really
because-
saying something right there.
Yeah, and we'll move the chairs away, you know,
Yeah,
everything away so people can really get a look. But there were some fascinating things that I learned. Like one thing, for example, was the science of barnacles, which I have looked at barnacles and I enjoy barnacles, but I hadn't researched them to the extent that Beth had. But they take on the color of whatever they're growing onto. And so part of the way we resolved the color palette of the room, and that informed the color palette of the room, was Beth having this knowledge. And so there are areas where you'll see that the barnacles are taking on different colors depending on what they're attached to in the room.
And there is an element that is incorporated into all of the sculptures and Sarah's drawings. Thinking about who settled this area, who was here at the turn of the century, and within our lifetime, people that we would have known, and then our lives, and then our families moving forward into the future. So we went to the public library here, and we were researching, looking for directories of the late 1800s, and early 1900s to now. And we were able to find them and copy them, and they're pulped into the sculptures to give reference to that community of the past and the current community, and then they themselves become maybe the future. It's weird, but and then Sarah has them literally on the drawings on the wall, so the yellow pieces that you'll see, we could go around the room and ask us, but the yellow ones are the Spanish language current business directories, and the copies are from the turn of the century. So,
which is when this building was actually built in around 1898. So it was a linen factory. So, and it made parachutes during the war, so it has its own interesting history.
Can you explain the river line again? Like, how does it relate? You said it's in terms of scale. Does it relate specifically to the?
well, I mean, it's within an interpretation that works in the room, but we took a map and blew it to an arena that we were able to then draw and trace it around the room. So, I mean, in theory, it would be down, up, way beyond the roof and down, I'm sure, but to kind of work it in the scale of the room itself.
So,
I just wanted to jump on that. So what I really love is that, in a sense, it's not so much that you're emphasizing the flow of the water, but you're emphasizing these places where living organisms cluster.
Right.
So can you talk just a little bit more about the forms that you've decided to use, the circles and some of the shapes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the barnacles are definitely, that's sort of one of her signature parts of her visual vocabulary, and the other shapes are things that I've been working with for a long time. I gave my daughters a spirograph kit when they were small, and they had it for about a week, and it's been in my studio ever since. And I spirograph on paintings and prints and drawings, and it felt natural to bring that element in here. We knew we needed to scale up, obviously, so we used a compass and a long pencil to draw the larger circles, and then lots and lots of stencils, like everything from takeout containers to different stencil shapes. And then, and Beth actually has in her vocabulary from her works on paper these oval-shaped things that become like a string, and that just seemed really, really beautiful. We needed to figure out a way. We first taped in the line, but it was too subtle, and we didn't really, it wasn't quite strong enough, and then that just seemed like a perfect solution to delineate the line, but not have it be more sort of a larger element than we wanted it to be. And to me, it reminds me of sort of the buoys that are strung to delineate like a safe swimming area versus where you're not supposed to go. And all of these things obviously became much more poignant in the last couple of weeks, and sort of developed that way. But I have to say, we didn't have a lot of preconceived notions of how it was going to go. I mean, starting from the fact that our friend Eileen had to pull out only 2 weeks before we began work. And so that we knew that was going to obviously change the dialogue significantly. But the experience of coming in here and working together is just, it's been really fantastic. I mean, we've known each other, but we've never worked together, and I've actually never collaborated in an art piece ever. So it's been really
a blast.
Yeah.
In a sense, we needed it too. I mean, it really, the idea of that community and needing each other and really feeling passionate about this work and having someone that I trust and really relied on to be, we worked so hard.
We're both hard workers
Yeah.
too. That was really good.
No.
Because
Yeah.
you could get partnered with a slacker and then be resentful or.
No, it happened, but it didn't. And then we propelled one another, and we really, there were some things that were challenging for both of us to push out of our practice, and really, again, that idea of that trust and bringing each other along. And I think we remained open to the process, and there were a lot of moments of glee in that, and yeah.
I would imagine that one of the first decisions you had to make was what was going to be the base background color. Did you paint the whole room first? And how did you decide on what color to use, because that was going to be the foundation for the start of everything?
Yeah, that's a great question. In preparation, we went and bought, you know, the Benjamin Moore, yeah, the sample little tubs of paint, so if you want to sort of change your bedroom, but you're not sure which one you want, you know, and they're inexpensive, and I thought, well, what better paint to put on the walls than wall paint? And there was latex.
That was new
and
for
waterways.
you, so,
That was,
yeah.
yeah, that was totally new, right? But I knew, I mean, in my own studio practice, I use a lot of different materials and different viscosities of paint, so I thought, well, the one thing I know I need is a bunch of different stuff. So I bought lots of those, and I found a water-based, like a latex spray paint, so we had a number of colors of that. And we came in and we just sort of started experimenting, really. We knew, I mean, Beth's work is more minimal coloristically, and my regular paintings are very, very colorful, so I knew we kind of were going to meet somewhere in between. But we started out with these sort of watery, blue, green, gray colors, and we ended up using probably the 7 or 8 different colors, and then going back and buying more of the 2 that are most sort of prevalent in the room, and then obviously mixing it with whites and mixing it with grays. And then what was nice was that we sort of decided along the way, you know, when to add a new element. We would have a conversation every time we added a new element. So for example, the fact, and then we knew that we needed to keep the number of elements sort of limited so that it didn't get too crazy in here.
Or we could be here for another 6 months and let it go
Yeah.
in that direction.
We'd love to.
I have a question for Pam. Your window into this process, I imagine is a new sort of information for you about like the collaborative process of creating something. How does that inform or inform you, or what can you say about your process as a political organizer around this really serious issue now, and like the creative process and the scientific and organizing, and how do those? I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, well, really nothing gets done, I think, outside of the collaborative process. And I think that this whole experience, for me, is interesting on about 2 levels. One is the content, but it's the process that you went through, because the collaboration, it produced a great friendship, but it also created an environment in which we can find ourselves able to contemplate some of these very serious implications for the choices that we've made around our energy and how we consume it, but how we produce it, most importantly, and the role that water has in that, and what we've done to the water. So, but I think, you know, what you're saying about collaboration, our work focuses really on bringing groups together, and it's very much collaborative. We bring groups who are working on mountaintop removal from, you know, coal mining, to people concerned about fracking and natural gas, people from out west who are dealing with, you know, with very serious water drought kinds of problems, but that water is being diverted, you know, for the use of coal mining and tar sands and things like that. And so bringing people together is a key part of how we try to make breakthroughs to find the first of all, defining the problem accurately, and then looking for the kinds of strategies that can bring about the changes that we need. Without that collaboration, nothing will happen, and nothing has happened on various social issues, from disability rights to civil rights. So it's a central part of it. And I think that's what's so fascinating to me about the grappling with these issues around climate change and energy consumption and the experience of what you had in New Orleans, but what we all went through with this hurricane. And that it's art that can bring us into an environment in which your intellect and your emotions can come together, and you can actually face some of these things. And sometimes it's provocative, sometimes it leads us, you know, to a point of wonder, but it always allows us to face the things in ourselves that we might otherwise find ourselves in some sort of polarized political debate. So I think it's an amazing experience that I wish could be not just stuck on these walls, but find its way more out into the public.
Pam kept saying, "Couldn't you have things on plywood?"
Yeah.
But it speaks to that, you know, something that I was very concerned with and taken with both in their proposal but also in this project, and being so thrilled to have Pam here is that because I've always I've curated several shows where art and science are sort of bridges, and I think of artists and scientists, they're, you know, in some ways very different, but in some ways they share a kind of an imaginative way to think about issues and problems. And you know, artists are essentially problem solvers. They don't have to prove it again and make it, you know, actually tangibly work in the world the way a scientist might have to. But I think that the imaginative thinking process is very similar. And so that's one of my interests in connecting artists and science. And so this wasn't, you know, quite as clearly that type of collaboration initially, but it seemed to be coming through more and more. And I'm interested in knowing, actually from all of you, the ways that we could, you know, think imaginatively about ways that artists and scientists could work together to help solve problems. Because I think artists can say, well, maybe this could happen, but, you know, it's not possible, but it allows us to think outside the box and come up with new solutions. And collaborate with scientists. There are a lot of artists doing that. So I know that you guys are not, you know, did not start out as those kinds of artists. I'm not saying that you will be now, but you know, I'm interested in hearing from you and also from Pam how you think. I don't know if it's not like there's a concise answer of different ways that artists and scientists could come together to collaborate on, you know, thinking about these bigger issues. It's a very long question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I know a lot of scientists who are musicians and have this sort of artistic side to themselves. So I think that there is a program in Denver, Colorado called Art Science, and it was started by a fellow named Todd Simon. And this is his goal, is to bring into the classroom art and science, and actually to teach science through art. And I think that's part of it. But I think the more access that children and the rest of us actually have to that sensibility, the more breakthroughs that we would have. So I think art is itself probably more of a key for science than the opposite. It's just,
Yeah, it's a great entryway.
I have a question, which is, when you were doing this research about the past, did you get back to Native American? Can you speak a little bit about what you found?
Yeah, you know, we didn't do too much historical research, and frankly, a lot of that was because we were waylaid by an entire, you know, quarter of our time. But we do know that we did look into it, and we know that there's the first peoples here were Mohawk Indians, were tribally sort of living in this area. I don't know if they were ever, I don't think they were ever settled here, but they were sort of nomadic through this area, absolutely. And I think then in the next source we found was that in around early 1600s, people who were living in Connecticut, colonists, sort of migrated down and started settling the town. So they were colonists from Connecticut, as well as and Dutch.
So
Coming up
English
from the English and the Dutch, basically. And then around the turn of the century, when some of these phone books were presented, they were other European groups, Italians, Polish, and Germans. And then it's in the past 50 years that the town has become predominantly Latino and represented by various Hispanic cultures, which is.
And I have to say that Sarah speaks Spanish fluently, and that came in very handy. We were able to find free parking. We ate excellent food, and also Sarah has used the tickets from our going out in and amongst the installation as well, so you might see some of the guest tickets, and that I thought was a great element to draw back in the community as much as we could get involved and learn about it.
Can I just say one thing about the Native American thing? Because I once did a little research. Patricia got me to put a proposal into this database. I don't know if that whatever happened to it, but in Yonkers. So anyhow, Yonkers was doing this project. I don't know if they ever did it, where they were daylighting.
They are, they just finished it.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
Great. I was read about, I grew up in Riverdale, so I was very aware of all the Native American names of the towns, like Mamaroneck and Chappaqua, and all these like very old places have these Native American, and some of them are anglicized. They're like Catholic Street is really a Native American word that got. Anyway, and they all refer to aspects about water, everyone. They're all, because the Sound and the Hudson border, this was really Westchester in general that I was researching. It's all that sort of like a Pikes Peak thing in the middle, and then there are all these little rivers, like Byram, or whatever that river is called. And when I sit here, I really feel that presence. There's something sort of eerily like the way, this sort of migratory way of these Native Americans, because one was called like, Mamaroneck means fresh water into salt, or salt water into fresh. They're all about different conditions of water, like the Eskimos with ice. And I feel kind of that there's a much more fluid relationship to, it sort of opens up the deeper fluid relationship that people once had to Westchester before it became this kind of highly developed suburban sort of habitation. I just feel that in here.
Well, it's
Great
really
information.
because this Sandy visited
Yeah,
us
right.
was a reminder that we're a coastal. This is a coastal community. I mean, all of the New York. I mean, obviously all the edges of the country, right? But that we are really close to the water here, and that it really affects us, and we forget. We don't really, interact with it in that way so much. But these are coastal communities, so. And I'm interested. The idea of the changing communities just brings me back to the question of community and kind of how we create community, and we sort of, this is like a mini intentional community that we created here for a period of time, which was kind of exactly what I was interested in sort of fostering in this idea of a residency. So I'm not sure I really have a question about that, but I keep coming back to how can we create these kind of intentional communities that can enact change in a meaningful way and take this kind of interaction to other places.
It's funny, I'm from White Plains, and we've been fighting a big environmental battle there because school wants to build a humongous campus, as it happens right on the headwaters of the river that comes down from Mamaroneck. And a lot of people have been concerned about traffic and other issues with it, but my real concern about it is the water, because you're talking about headwaters coming down into the Sound, and this is the more development we have up in White Plains, the more flooding Mamaroneck gets. And another issue is that we took a tramp into the Saxon Woods Park, supposedly pristine, right? And there's an area where the river takes a bend, so that every time there's a flood, all the plastic bottles that normally go right down the river and into the Sound get stuck there. And you can go and see that area and just see thousands and thousands of plastic bottles, styrofoam cups, and they're just all sitting there in the woods along the banks of the river. And every kid that ever lost a ball you know, and it floated off in the street, it winds up in the river and eventually in the Sound. Anyway, I've been thinking about, because I'm an artist and I'm visual, it just seems to me that and I've gotten some maps from a surveyor to try to start doing this, of showing the impact. You cannot, it's very hard to find an image of the river and how things that happen, just, you know, a few communities inland, impact all the way down the river and into the Sound. And I mean, I just hate to think of what's collecting down in the Sound with all this crap that's, you know, anyway, that's my, but, you know,
That's the idea of thinking locally, you know, really working in your community.
Exactly, and I'm trying to portray it visually. I mean, that I keep it, we've also started a take it or leave it shed, which is fantastic in White Plains. If you ever want to see it, it's very cute. And some artists painted it, it's very cool. But, so, and we want to start having displays there on other issues. And I keep thinking that if we could make a visual, some visual representation of what's happening with the rivers. See, you're talking about water moving up higher. I'm thinking about water moving down. Anyway, you know, and I just keep, you know, along the lines of how can artists make these issues real to people.
Yeah.
I've been trying to think how we could do that. Anyway.
Water is the key.
It's the lifeblood.
It's the lifeblood. It's the key to everything. And what you've described is there is no away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can't throw anything away.
Right.
It goes somewhere. And we've done too much to our water in terms of polluting it with the kinds of things that people just flush down their toilets. I mean, like drugs and the endocrine disruptors that are in our drinking water is a serious concern. We're using millions and millions of gallons of water to frack for natural gas. That in fact, in 2000, the USGS, U.S. Geological Service, was supposed to be mapping the aquifers, the underground system of water in the United States, and they weren't given funding. So we really don't even understand, you know, how all of our water is connected to groundwater. And the DOE was supposed to produce a roadmap on the water energy nexus. And in 2005, they were mandated to do that. That report still doesn't exist. So we're literally flying blind by pursuing a water-intensive energy system with coal, gas, nuclear power. All of these are very water-intensive, and they warm the water and they're polluting of the water. The nuclear power plant in Westport, Connecticut had to shut down in August because the water that is drawn from the Sound, or the river there, was too warm to cool the reactor. So, I mean, there are consequences for our choices, and each and every issue, it seems to me, if we come back to water, the availability of water, access to water in the developing world is key. So, it's at the heart of what we should focus on. If we can make it real to people, we can start a process of a broader discussion.
Well, someone over here had a question. I'm going to say one thing before. I would be interested in ways people could get together and talk about, you know, artists collaborating on, you know, we're sort of the public relations end, I guess, you know what I mean, in some ways, right? So, someone had a question. Thank you.
Two questions, but quickly. At IBEAM, earlier this year, there was a fantastic exhibit on water that had come from Ireland, and one of the artists had in fact precipitated out all of the drugs from California and then was selling them as a sort of 19th century cure-all nostrum because they contained a little of everything. It was a very interesting piece. So my two questions were, for Sarah and Beth, what do you think may change in your own practice when you go back to working individually? And then the other is, since you created this environment here and it will be up for some months?
Through January 19th.
What other events will be happening, educational or otherwise, in the space to take advantage of the environment?
Yeah, great idea. Since this is the first residency, I mean, and I've been an educator also, and I teach art through science, actually, which we were just doing in there a little while ago. But so I'm very interested in that, and But since this is the first residency and we didn't quite know what would happen, we haven't done that, but it's certainly something that we can work on, because, and moving forward, absolutely, would be, it's an important part of the residency.
And I think, for my own work, it's hard. I don't know. I'm a little excited and nervous to get back into the studio on Monday morning after being, working so large. And then, but then also we worked on these little pieces on paper together that was so fun and such a joy. I mean, it was hard because we were really ambitious with the number of works we want. Once we decided to make the paper pieces, we knew we needed a certain number in order to make them feel like a significant component of the room. So we made these 13 works on paper in 3 days, working together, not on the same one at exactly the same moment, but practically.
Side by side.
Yeah, and that's been great, but I think that Beth and I are both interested in seeing ways that we can collaborate in the future. Beth is ambitiously proposing that we apply for an MTA grant, so maybe you'll see us in the subways. I don't know. Yeah, it would be really fun. So worldwide.
Especially since the subways
Yeah, it could be that low relief. I think it could be very interesting. So that's exactly going back into the studio practice. For me, I really enjoy a collaborative process, and I've been able to do that several times. And also, I did a project down in Battery Park City, working with the Parks Department. So that became a collaborative aspect, and has propelled my practice and established that kind of working way, so that I am in my studio often alone and theorizing, and it's heady, and then bringing it to a collaborative process allows me to go beyond and think way beyond what I could on my own. And that also, having been a teacher, brings that back into thinking that way. And even tonight when we were talking about having everyone come in and really get immersed in the room and the installation, is thinking about, going back to the very beginning. It's almost teaching me and talking about how we've established the structure of the room and bringing in the water line and being able to share it with everyone here. So I think that will help my practice be able to talk about it and think further, and also projects that we could do together, and be in the conversation in other places of what's happening. So.
And I envision, these conversations to hopefully be beginnings of conversations, because obviously we can't solve the problem of water this evening. We haven't even really, explored it as fully as we might, and we haven't explored as fully as we might the work of these wonderful artists. But each conversation can be a seed conversation that can open up in other places, and including here, but in other places too. So hopefully you'll take these conversations and start having them in your community, and in places where something is happening, but in places where you're not. Because I do think that water is, it is the most fundamental thing, and the waterways are all connected. So I think, is there any last final questions, or if you guys have any final things you'd like to say, that I think we can, while you're thinking?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to be back in the space. It's great to have gotten to know that better. It's wonderful, Pam's work has influenced my life and for many years, but my art and my politics have always been very sort of separate. And it's nice to sort of have it all be in one space. And I thank everybody for your support, and I thank my family for being so patient this past month.
I thank her family. I should thank my own family too.
Thank you. Any last comments? So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly fold up all the chairs, and I hope you will stay and have another glass of wine and speak with the artists, more personally with questions that you have. So thank you very much.
Is this a trick chair?